feel like everybody's right and everybody's wrong.
100%. Why is this important? Why are we even going here? He's helped a lot of guys. He's also not had success with a lot of guys.
Come in with a purpose, and they're very intentional with what they do and how they do it.
From the majors to the sandlot, baseball and softball share space in one place. Welcome to the farm system.
Fellas, and the ladies, welcome back to another episode of The Farm. Taylor, what's going on? If we call Nikki P, we got to call you Tay-C. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I know you've gone by that before, but I'm
Tay-C, TC, we're here for
TC.
it.
What other nicknames you had?
T.
T.
TC might be too long. For
Yeah.
some people,
It's
you know
just
what I mean?
a little
Sometimes.
too much.
Yeah, it's the little things.
A little too much. I like
Yeah.
the outfit, by the way. You always
Color
got the little 1-2,
Color
little 1-2
coordinating.
punch. By the way,
Mhm.
you know what I'm saying?
It's here and it's there.
It's here and
You
it's
know
there. You know, and well, I think first off, let's just give a little quick. Did I even give a real intro? Did I say welcome back to the farm? Did I say
Yeah.
that?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, if I didn't, welcome back to
Yeah.
the farm. Here we are.
We got that in.
But yeah, we got those in. So first off, let's give. I want you to share this part because this is. I'm actually just interested because you get to talk. We obviously had our Cribs episode that we had dropped the other day. So if you ain't seen the Cribs episode, you need to go back and check
Yeah,
that
you need to
out.
go see that.
We also going to put it on the training page, right? So we're gonna put it on the training page. So if you haven't seen it on social media and you don't want to dig for it, go check it out on our training page inside the link in the bio. Whatever social media you cover us on, you go check that out.
Y'all, he's so crazy. You ain't got to dig for it because I pinned it to the top of the profile. You're welcome.
Oh, well, all right. Well, you guys are good then. And then speaking of that, yeah, I should do that too. That's smart.
You're
That's
welcome.
smart. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
It's a little thing.
And then, but also in-house with our in-house training and also to some of our clients that have went off to college and they're coming back for summer or any of those things too. We have changed the in-house how we're actually training. So I kind of wanted to touch that because I know you've gotten to talk to a lot of parents that have gotten to be on the other side of that. So why don't you kind of just touch on like what we're doing now and like what that has looked like and how people have responded from that, because I think that's like a big thing that I think is, and I'll go into the piece of like training why I feel like it's so significant and maybe really help coaches, and then also to really help private facilities and things too as well, and or just get ideas if you are a coach, ideas on why we do it that way in-house and why we get results that way. So anyways, yeah, go ahead and kind of open that piece up of what we've changed in-house.
Yeah. So essentially, the structure that we've now adopted is awesome. Everybody's been enjoying it, raving about it. So before, where athletes had, a day that they could come, a day they could come for groups.
Or two. Depending on what plan
yeah.
they were on.
Up to 3,
yeah.
for sure.
We also had some superheroes that did pay multiple days and also had privates and all those other things were going in.
People love a little
Yes.
group and a little private.
Yeah, I get it. I agree with that. That's
I'm
smart.
for it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But so now essentially what they can do is come anytime between 3 p.m. and 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday and come and get their work in. So, obviously you and I are very familiar with this structure since we grew up in cages in a facility. But having that community and having the people around you and being able to not only come in, have the freedom to work somewhat at your own pace, but also have a team behind you there as a guide. Your programming is up on a TV. You can look at it. However, a lot of our high school guys are responsible enough. They know what they're doing, and it's cool to see them be responsible and come in like little gentlemen and
it's more
start
like
getting their work in.
community,
Yes,
for sure. It's
more
huge.
community. And
Also, before we move on, please, can you not strike my fake plant next to you? You hit it with a karate chop, right?
Did I?
Right to the side of the fake plant, and that's my favorite fake plant. So if you could
Watch out.
be careful, my favorite. Anyways, back
Listen.
to the thing. I just saw you hit a karate chop, and I had to stick up for my plant.
we got a rule. First of all, there's no fake plants allowed, but we'll get to that later. Okay.
Okay.
Back to where
No
I
fake
was.
plants.
Talk about the
biblical
community.
drop right there.
Yeah,
by the way.
you're
Anyways, go ahead.
welcome.
Proceed. Proceed.
Yeah,
proceed.
small things.
Proceed.
But yeah, no, for me, I've been trying to take some time and at the end of the day to sit in the workspace where the athletes, where we have everybody, be working out and getting their stuff in. If you watch that tour video, you'll know what I'm talking about. There's
Yeah.
separate spaces.
Yeah. We keep it gangsta up in here.
That's
you know what I'm saying?
right. That's
anyways,
right.
you also won't understand that unless you watch it. So go ahead and, look at that nugget. Yeah.
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 But it's nice to sit out there and just observe everybody working cohesively. It's nice to see our coordinators running the room, running the players, allowing the players to navigate these different prep work, different drills, new things, new tools, our brand new strength and conditioning space over here, everything that we have, moving out there. It's so awesome to see just the room running itself, people working together, the older boys being role models for the younger boys, coming in like they know what they're doing. I would argue half of our 10-year-olds, or probably all of our 10-year-olds, come in like little professionals. Sometimes, a little bit more mature than our older guys. But it's been really awesome to see, and everybody's been loving this new structure. And then, of course, we left Fridays for, privates and evals. And then, of course, prior to 3 p.m. is, where we get to do cool things like this, like a podcast, get our content out for you guys, be able to share resources, and, of course, stack in those privates because everybody loves a little private group combo.
Yeah, and that's, again, on the same side of that, the difference between, obviously, group and private, and again, martial arts side, that's like normal, where you have your group classes and you have everybody together, because it is, there's a big piece. First off, you can't spar by yourself. Start one, so you're gonna need somebody with you, and then also for martial arts, you also will, when you're doing the sparring or you're doing group training, you also get to see a whole bunch of different looks, different people that fight in different ways, and they all teach you something slightly different. Kind of same way when you get cohesive, when you have all the players coming in, you might have, again, because it's an open structure, where you might have, a 10-year-old with a 18-year-old, right? There's so much interaction between the two, and like so many different tips, and it kind of builds that cohesion in-house with our clients, where they get to work with each other. And you learn so much. I know it's like usually if you look at families that have two athletes in the family, usually the youngest one is usually better because it constantly has to grow up. Going against their older brothers, things like that as well. The same thing too is like when they get to come in here, like we have the young guys competing against 18-year-olds, and again, people are actually really shocked. But even instructors in house, like Nikki P and also Cody was saying that is like how we have some of our young guys like, oh, I want to hit off the machine too. I want to hit that slider, hit the curveball, and because they have like nothing to lose, and also they're seeing success in front of them, it gives them so much confidence to go. And actually try and compete there. And obviously, when you're hitting that and then you get back in the game, it builds so much confidence too. It's like, hey, I was doing better than that 15-year-old that was in there, and I'm 12 or whatever, right? And it's fun. They get to compete, and then we get to mess with them too. And it's like, man, you can't let the 12-year-old beat you, man. Come on now. And so that becomes really fun as well. And then you might have mentioned it. If not, did you mention the strength side too?
Just a little.
Okay, just a little thing. Yeah,
a little piece.
So then we also have. Obviously, the strength side, right? So the strength side is going into next month. We'll also be programming from the strength side of things. If you know and you follow us on social media, and I talk about this a ton, is how people strength train dramatically affects how they move, and dramatically affects specifically to their technique and all the thing that comes into that as well. And so, it's always been a goal for us to move everything in-house and be like a one-stop shop for all things. I've had the opportunity multiple times within the company's history to hire pitching guys, to hire, again, let's say infield guy, catching guy, a strength guy, all those different things. And I've actually been, because people ask me all the time, like, why don't you guys just do pitching? Why don't you guys do strength too, right? And I'm very deliberate I feel like we produce at such a very high level from the hitting side. Like, I'm not going to just hire some random pitching guy just to say we have pitching. I'm not going to go and hire some random strength guy just to say that we do strength. If we're not going to do it the right way, then I'm not going to do it. And so I'm very particular with that. And so we've been very slow to pull certain levers because I want the result. Like, it should mean something when you come and hit at the farm. What that represents, and again, it should be the same way from the strength side, and it should be the same way if we add pitching. It should be the same way if we add catching. If we should be the same way if we do all of those different things that we do in house. Is I want to it to be at a very high level. The other part with that as well is now that we'll be doing that, like you mentioned, with it being up on the wall. We actually, again, also got after our break-in, we've got our TVs back installed. Not only every time, God deliver, right? We had two TVs, right? We had one TV, then we had two TVs, right? And then now we got the three TVs out there now that are doing that. We also, in here as well, since we opened up, our hours more and gave that spread, building also that environment and that community where we have the in-house players can come in here and spend some time. Back again, I've been a part of a lot of different facilities and things like that as well, where the players are in here, and again, me and you did this, right? We're in the academy, we're doing our homework, or we'd get there after school, or we'd get there after practice. I'd be coming in full uniform, ready to go. And so we created some environments in here too, where there's places where they can, again, in between, maybe they're strength training or hitting, or again, maybe they're going to hit later on, and they're going to play some, they're going to be here for the next 5 hours. They don't need to be constantly training the whole time, and this becomes like a second home for them.
Right.
Areas where they can, play MLB The Show against each other, multiple TVs in like a player lounge type area where they can just hang out, eat food, all those different things as well, do their homework, all that stuff, and really enjoy their time that's here, and also make this, like you mentioned, instead of a single day, right, there's 4 days that they can now come in, where some of them have been taking advantage of that immediately, right? Where it's like, okay, I'm coming every day, right? And then I know during summer, that's been some of the feedback too, right, is been some of that. What's been your, because people were saying like during the summer and we'll have more time, all these things, like I can't wait to take advantage of those things as well. And my goal, right, would be for us, obviously we need to expand, staff is going to have to do those things, we have to train people up, all this stuff. But my goal would be we're 7 days a week, right? And that there's never a day where, again, that you can there's always a time period where people can come in, and again, that they can train, if that's the weekend, all those things, and, we'll grow to there. But I know that that's been a big piece where people have been doing quite a bit of like referrals, right? Which been telling, other people to come and train. So what has kind of been the feedback there, just from a parent perspective, of why maybe if the facility owner is listening, like, okay, well, why would I do that instead of just doing lessons? Like, what is the parents' kind of responses of why it's been so helpful for them or useful from that side, or why they find so much value in it?
Sure. Well, we have a fair amount of athletes, young and older, that are homeschooled. So a lot of them have a lot more freedom in their schedule before these, later in the evening practice times, games. And so that's, something else that not only just occupies their time, but also keeps them productive, right? They finish their, homeschool schedule earlier in the afternoon, then they can come here and start getting their work in before their other team practice, before their evening game. And that also, again, where we've talked a lot about in previous episodes, but that college readiness and preparing athletes to play at an elite level. You and I both know, we all know, like, to play at an elite level, you have to have elite behavior. And that comes with putting hours in, putting time in, and learning responsibilities, and that, as you might call it, that dog behavior, that dog mentality where, look, I've got things I have to get done. That includes my schoolwork, because student comes before athlete always. I want to get my homework done. I want to do it in the place where I'm also going to get my workout in, and where I'm also going to hit at. And then if I want to watch some baseball afterwards on the TV in the players' lounge after, and kick it and decompress, I can do that all in one place.
Or wait for my, again, my dad gets off work at this time.
At this
whatever,
time,
right?
I
Like,
can
okay,
hang out.
I trained and did my homework, and now I'm hanging out watching the MLB game until my dad gets here, right? Or whatever, to pick me up.
Sure.
So it creates that environment, because I know for me, again, I didn't always, a lot of, especially our younger athletes, they don't have transportation. Well, like one of our freshmen's like, man, if I just, I could get here and, I just need to ride there, right? But now it takes that away, where it's like, hey, again, if you can get here early, again, you can stay, and again, make it an environment that you want to stay at, that you want to hang out with. And I'm really about creating an environment that guys want to hang out with and spend a lot of time there. And also, too, even for us in-house, right? Like, some guy just DM'd me the other day, and he was like, man, like, if I was there, like, I wouldn't want to leave. Like, again, that place is, and it's like, well, that's the environment we want to create, right? Where it's like, you can't get enough of, being around. And so, like, if you're a business owner, if you're also, too, how does this go over to if you were a coach on the field, right? Like, what is that? How's that, all this stuff translate? Is the same way as you should be creating environments. Like, for example, if that's your training facility, let's say you have an indoor. Some guys are blessed to have an indoor. Great. You should create an environment that guys want to spend time there to do. And again, along with it, like, there's ways of doing it. Like, again, I know some people are like, oh, well, private facility, you guys have different funding, X, Y, and Z. Like, look, it's the same way. Like, when I was high school baseball coach, we were doing the same thing. We're finding ways, again, if that's individual parents, if that's fundraising, if that's candy bars, if that's all these other things, is creating, and you slowly build things over time. When we first moved in this building, that's like that Cribs episode, we first moved in this building when we were training people, it did not look like this, right? And we slowly added more things over time to create that environment. We didn't have a ping pong table. We didn't have multiple TVs, all over the place out there in that area. We didn't have, the gym area. We didn't have all these things for everybody to do. We built these things and we added over time, and you should be adding to your environment. For example, when LSU first opened, it didn't look like LSU now. They've built things over time to build all of these things, and they slowly added more and more things, and then they finally got an indoor, then they finally did all these other things, right? But you slowly have to build it over time. So instead of getting that mindset of going, oh well, we can't afford that, it's gonna be, how can we afford that? It's changing that mindset. And then two, on top of that as well, is it's always also starts with environment is also not just set with buying things, but also too the type of culture you go in, right? For example, dramatically how much it can affect your indoor or your practices or all those things. You know how many people too run a practice and just don't have music? Mm-hmm. Music is a game changer. I remember when I got to college and I finally could have music at practice. Oh man, it was such a big deal. Now you can go right now. Again, there's no reason. Again, as a coach, you can find a way, fundraise, all these things. Go buy $120 speaker, whatever, and put one out just like we do inside of our facility and playing music. And that's one way of creating environment. Obviously, how when you get into the place too, as well as how, your coaching staff, the energy that they have, you showing up and having all that energy, that also sets the environment, right? You want to create a place where people enjoy getting work in, right? It's already hard enough to push your body to the limit. It's already hard enough mentally. You had a long day and all these things. The last thing you want to do is have an environment where you come in and everybody's dragging, the energy's down in the building, all of those things as well. You should feel the energy of your training environment when you walk in. It should feel different. And I think that's, big as well. And also too, how great it is for youth athletes for, in that same setting, right? And again, maybe you have an organization or a high school that has feeder teams. Maybe you're a college that again has recruits coming in and they're just, again, they're taking their official visits or whatever that might be. That interaction as well is with the, older community. Is your youth athletes, when they spend time with older athletes, one, they start getting comfortable being around older athletes. Well, guess what? When they go to high school, they're a freshman. They're competing against seniors. When you go to college, you're a freshman and you're competing against seniors again, right? And then also, too, it's a big deal. You get to college and you're 17, 18, 19 years old. You might be competing, and especially if you're playing NAIA or, again, the guy just started his clock late or whatever, you might be competing against a guy that's 24 or older in certain cases. I've seen some crazy cases, right? So if you're not used to having older people around and being able to that cohesion between the two, it builds that confidence in that setting where they're going to have to do that throughout their lives, and they're going to have to learn how to compete there. So it's really good for youth athletes to kind of get in that environment. And I think one thing that I try to set more than anything is one of the things that it's more important than anything we train, like any of the techniques, any of those other things, is just teaching athletes how to train. Right. And so one of the things I had a coach reach out to me the other day. I played college ball with him, and he was like, man, this one of the kids on our team, he didn't know at the time that he trained with us. And he was like, man, he's just so intentional with how he trains. Right. And it's yeah, not only is that kid's personality that way, but at the same time, when he started training with us, right, and at one point it was just, brute force, brute strength, brute speed, everything as hard and fast as I could. Now also too, he's so focused on technique. It's not that he isn't moving, just moving slow, or he's not running, and intent in those ways, but he's intentional, right, about how he's training, what he's working on. If he's working on max out right now, whatever that might be, if it's, weight room, sprinting, whatever those things are, okay, well, he's intentional about that. And then if it's technique focused, well, he's intentional about that. So one thing I also like to do from an environment is just teaching people how to work, right, and how to train, so that when they're not with us, they can take those same things not only into baseball, but also into their lives, and being intentional about how they're growing and developing themselves. And I know that that's obviously for me and you, that's one of the ways that we've always really connected is again, what does it look like? Again, for example, when's the last time someone checked in on you, Taylor, and was like, have you been reading? It's you're an adult, right? Your development, all those things. If you have to have somebody constantly keeping you accountable to those other things, right, or making sure that you're developing, rather than that being just a desire of mine now, it's man, if I don't grow, I really feel it. It feels like stagnant water, and it feels poisonous. I need to move. I need things to happen. And so, but again, those were developed, you've been journaling for
Ever.
Yeah, really long time, right? And that's just a habitual thing now, right? It feels weird when you don't, right? Same thing, I've been reading for a good portion of my life. Now, don't get me wrong, you met me when I wasn't, right? Okay. It became a thing dramatically. Like I would say I dramatically started reading when I got into college, and I've far more read, way more since I've been out of college than I ever did when I was actually in college.
Yeah. Same.
Especially because I was reading about a whole bunch of subjects that I didn't care about, and or somebody was forcing me to do it, not things that I was passionate about at the time. So I think that's one thing as well, is like it gets overlooked a lot, but it's a massive part where it's like, okay, you could apply that same foundation to so many different areas with different techniques in so many different places. And I think that becomes with it. It's like, again, if you want to get better at Spanish, if you want to get better at ballet, if you want to get better at, they want to get better at golf late in their career. A lot of baseball players do that, right? Like all of these things, you can take that same foundation and move it over. If you want to get better at anatomy, biomechanics, all these things, well, like all of the techniques that come into like being intentional with how you're spending your time, how you're prioritizing, all these other things as well. You can take those same techniques and those skills that we're teaching that maybe are soft skills, I guess you could maybe say there, that they can apply over in other areas of their life. And that's like an environment and a different type of training that people overlook constantly, is like the bigger picture of what's being developed, let alone the techniques that they might be learning at this point in their life too,
Well, and I think so. One, when you were, talking about the journaling and the reading, so it just reminded me of one of the days in here we had one of our professional athletes watching you train another professional athlete, and he was taking notes.
Yeah.
Which even our, a lot of our other players also take notes, but not everyone does.
For sure.
And I've noticed it's harder to get some of the younger guys to take notes and bring a journal, even, bring a pencil. But, we have a lot of softball players in here, and they, religiously take notes.
Yeah.
But it was funny because one time one of our younger guys came in and he said, "Why is he sitting back there writing?" And I was like, "Well, he's taking notes." And he was like, "Oh, well, I'm going to do that. Can I bring my tablet?" And I was like, "You can bring whatever you want and take notes.
Notes, your phone, whatever.
You can take notes on whatever you want." But I don't know what it is about younger athletes not wanting to take notes. But if you can start it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think one of the big things that becomes there is, and again, also a great note there is from a coaching standpoint. For example, why do you take notes in school? Well, because I'm going to get quizzed on it. I'm going to need that information. So if I think I'm not going to need that information, or if I'm getting spoon-fed that information every time I come in, that's why, like, even in the very beginning, when let's say we go to hit heavy balls, and I'm like, hey, there's 3 things you're going to need to remember, and I'm telling you now, I'm going to quiz you on it.
Listen, so he'll ask you almost every time, if not 17 times I've heard it.
Yeah, 100%. So I'm going to quiz you on it, right? So then that becomes that other part where I'm going to say, hey, what are the 3 things of heavy balls? What are the things, what are this? What is that? What is that? And so I'm making sure you're retaining information. Right. So as a teacher, right, which is what a coach is, as a teacher, I have to make sure it's not what I'm talking about. It's not what you want to make sure that they're learning, right? Yeah. So you can be preaching, right? But are they retaining? Are they actually consuming? And when they're not there, are they going to take that in? So me quizzing them is, hey, okay, so what just happened right there?
Yep.
Right? Like I had an athlete, I did this, I was hitting actually with Lombardo's kid out in Oregon. I was hitting, she has a son that plays baseball. Right. And so we went to hit, and he's a kid that's a pretty good athlete, but he doesn't have a lot of awareness of his body. Right. And he's a long, lanky kid, grew like a foot in the last year. And also, too, he doesn't train with us. Right. He's just the first time I ever just hit with him. Right. And so we go to hit, and he swung there. And in the very beginning, I always talk about this was like skill acquisition wise, is I bring up to him like, hey, this is what you did. This is what it looks like on video. Here, I show you all the things. Right. But then 20 minutes later, I asked him, he hits a ball, and I'm like, what'd you feel there? I don't know. I didn't really feel anything. Okay. Well, on this next one, I want you to be mindful, because I'm going to ask you what you felt. Then all of a sudden he takes 2 more swings. Hey, what'd you feel there? Oh, I felt this, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Maybe he was right. Yep. I agree. Blah, 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 blah. Now the next 2 swings. Hey, what'd you feel there? Oh, I felt this. I thought that was pretty good. Well, maybe I didn't think it was very good. So then I go and show him on video. Is this what you want it to be? Oh, no, that actually wasn't really good. Okay, good. So now we're building awareness, right? So then I start quizzing him right? And I'm making sure he's being intentional, because when he's in the box, and then I reiterate it, why am I being so big on this, right? When you're in the box, are you going to have me? Are you going to have video? Are you going to have data? Are you going to have all these other things? Now, again, when you're training, you might have data, you might have video, you might have those other things, but you know what you probably won't have, and I know you won't have, is me consistently. So I gotta need you as a leader, right? As a teacher, as a coach. My job is to make you not need me.
Right.
That's the goal, right? So I'm training you as if I'm going to be gone tomorrow. And in his situation, I was going to be gone tomorrow. So I'm like, you got to get used to me not being here, right? And this is how you have to go about training and building these habits in your thing. But again, along with what you're saying is, I think is like learning that skill is like, hey, you're going to need this. And like, for example, let's say it's, you know what I got saved in my phone? Every gate code for all of my friends that I go see consistently. My family. I got everybody's gate codes in my phone. You know why I put it in there? Because I need it, right? And when I pull up to the house, instead of me going, hey, what's your gate code again?
Yep.
I have everybody's gate codes inside my phone, right? So I write that down and take notes because I'm going to need it later. And also, like you're mentioning, another reason, and again, it's a learning technique, is even if we never look at the notes ever again, just writing, the act of writing it down, your brain retains it better.
Yes.
So it's just an act as well as just recapping what we talked about. And again, I would say this with like Nikki P constantly is when I'm talking about something, she'll start taking notes on her phone or she'll start writing things down. And then, again, she'll even tell me, she's like, hey, I'm paying attention. Like, I'm just writing it down, what you're saying. She's taking notes in her phone rather than handwriting them. Now, for me, and because this has been backed by science, typing and writing are different processes in your brain, and your brain, by the studies that have come out, retain better when you physically write. So I did a hybrid in between, but my problem was is then I hand notes and then the binder gets lost or all these things that could happen with it. Oh man, I wish I had this in type form. This is annoying. So then what I did is I went and got a big iPad that I could handwrite notes on, and then I can literally tap it, hold it, and then it turns it into text, right? And then now I can use it and put it inside a drive or whatever I want to, notes or whatever I want to reference later on. So I found a hybrid between the two. I do need to physically write because it helps me retain information better. I can't just highlight in a book and not take any notes. I can't just type it because I still won't retain it the same. Especially with like fast swiping or like you could just tap things, like your brain is moving too quick. And like even that extra second of like, hey, let me write this down and like process that. It gives you a chance to, digest it and break it down a little bit more. So that was like a hybrid that I also did as well. So I think on the same side of that, it's such a quality point for coaches and things as well. Is like, hey, you want your kids to be better learners, challenge them to be, right? Challenge them to retain. Right? If you don't challenge them to retain, they won't build those skills, and they won't, again, if you want them to self-organize and like learn how to do that, is start testing them on things too. Like, hey, again, what was this? What was that? Hey, and building that whole process. Okay, you're struggling. Yes. I do this as I train guys, right? And it's a progression to get here, but I'll get there at one point. Hey, this is what I saw you doing in game. This is what we're going to work on today. This is the plan. I'm going to guide you, right? Months down the road, hey, so what were you doing in your game? Oh, I was pulling my hip. I was spinning my hip early. Okay, great. So what are you going to do today? What is your plan so that you could fix that and intentionally work on that? Well, I'm going to do this, this, and this. Okay, hey, these three, I 100% agree. I think that's a great idea. This one, I'm like, what was your thought process behind this one? Oh, I thought this, and this, and this. Maybe I'm like, well, that's a great idea, actually. I like how you broke that down. Let's see how that works, right? And or I might be like, you know what? I see where you're going with that, but my only thoughts are this because you also have this problem. So maybe I wouldn't do this one. What do you think about, give me another idea of something else that you could do. Oh, well, I could do step overs instead. Perfect. Let's add those in. I think those are really good. Great idea. Let's run out that plan. Right. And then I start doing that. Then I start going in, for example, like Paul Skeens at LSU, right? He's one of the top players in the United States right now for colleges, probably going to go, pretty close to top like 5 picks in the draft this year. Is I started doing that with him where he would start coming in, and I had him for a couple years. So at the end of his end of his last year, senior year, he'd come in and he was I didn't really talk to him much. He'd come in, he'd be hitting, and then I'd either say, hey, like this is what I'm, I might mention something to him as he's going through his process, or he'd come up to me and say, hey, I'm kind of feeling this, but what do you got on this, right? And it became very more open, and all he needed was like he was his own hitting coach. All he needed at that point in his career was for me to open the door. Right? As soon as I open the door, he's going to get his work in. And then if I need to guide, and I said this to a parent earlier when I was talking to him. There's a song that's about this, but again, I think it's a really good way for you to think about it as a coach. I just want to be the riverbanks. Like, you're the river, right? I just want to guide you. I don't want to impede you. I don't want to hold you back. I don't want to, make you into a lake. You're a running river. I want to let you go, but I'm just going to guide you like the riverbanks, right? I don't want to hold you back. I just want to guide you to where you're going, and do it that way. And so, like, as a coach there, like, that's my goal, is more to just kind of set up, some boundaries, but give you freedom, right? And also guide you towards where you want to go, and never impede that process. But I think that's a big point that you're saying there, is like, if I want to build that in players, is I have to, make sure that they're retaining that information.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always look like a physical written test. It might be a question. It might be like I asked.
Bullet points.
Yeah.
It might be bullet points. Maybe
For sure.
you write 3 words, and
Yeah.
that's your cue for your cues,
Yeah.
and your cue for your feels.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be a novel. It
Yeah,
can
100%.
be one word. One
Yeah.
word notes that that's your cue.
For sure. And then also you can go and reference those. I used to take notes. I had I tell you this all the time, but I had a little journal I had in my back pocket, because even back then, even more now, coaches don't like when you have your phone on the field, right? Get away from your phone, right? But they didn't mind if I had a little journal in my back pocket. So I got a little, 4-inch by 2.5-inch notebook that I put in my back pocket, right? And during practice, and I'd have a pen with me, right, or a little pencil or whatever. And I usually have like the little short one or whatever, right? I'd have this little pencil with me, and I'd keep it in my back pocket. And so let's say if coach said something, or I had a field during BP, or I figured something out, or just like you still do this now, and we do the same thing, is when I'm doing a workout or what my routine is, I would write it down, right? Because now what happens? 2 different ways. Either I look back later on because I was hitting so well during that time, and I want to remember what I was working on, because I might have slightly shifted a cue, slightly shifted a drill, got away from doing something. Oh man, that used to help me so much. That, or I look back and go, I haven't been having the results that I wanted, and being like, oh, I think this is when I started going left, right? Is because I started doing this. I started doing this. I started doing, these jumps, or I started doing whatever, right?
Sure.
And so when you monitor that and take documentation of that, then you can look back on that and again, evaluate what was actually going on, rather than just purely trying to go by your memory. This has been known in, if you look at like eyewitnesses when it comes into court, eyewitness testimony isn't. It's great for like moving it's a great way to connect with a jury, but it's not great for presenting facts, because people don't remember things very clearly, especially because they're remembering them from their perspectives, their trauma, their life experiences. Right. Oh, he looked angry. Okay, what does that mean, right? What does angry mean to you? Did he lower his eyebrows? Like, was he? Did he make? Like all these things, right? That are all subjective. So again, along with that, that's why I think another way of documenting is like taking video. Right? And that's why we also have that as well. We can look back. I do that after every session. Jarrell knows, because I usually go sit in his office and I sit there and watch video for the next, hour after the person leaves, right? And they don't even know that, right? Our session's over. They leave. I go and review all the video, look at what we did and go, man, he was moving better before we did that drill. Or maybe that was too fast of a progression. I shouldn't have moved too quick. And I review my session, right, in my head. I favorite my favorite swings and things like that as well, and say, okay, and then I have that to show them later. Or, hey, I didn't really like this, and this is why, and I'll show that in the next session. So I continually do that as well for myself. And video is a great way, and I do that all the time. When a guy was hitting really well, for example, like Jake Hager, me and him there was one session when me and him hit together, one of our pro guys. There was one session where he stroked, like just crushed balls, right? And it was the best he's ever felt, right? So we often will go back and reference that session, and he'll say, oh yeah, it's the red shirt day. Right. And then we'll go back and look at the red shirt day and look at the routine that he was having, and why this felt so good, and what was going on, and how he was moving, and blah, 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 blah. Right. And we always go and reference that, where video has a really powerful way, especially because the sounds, sights, all those other things that can bring back those feelings, or, oh yeah, I remember I was feeling this, or I was feeling that, or whatever, can be huge there. So yeah, I think that those can be big there. And then also too, going back to that spot as well. Why do you think I've had a lot of people talking about that or talking about that. Oh man, I'm going to go tell this person, or I'm going to go tell that person, all those things within that environment. Why do you think that parents are finding so much value in that setup with how we currently have it?
Well, everybody likes more for less.
Ain't that something? Ain't that something?
Everybody likes more for less.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, really, you can't beat the 4 days for the same price point.
Yeah.
And as we build more of the community here in the players lounge and the parents lounge, and I mean, even today we've got a guy coming, his kid's going to train, he's got to do a conference call. We can do that all in one place. If his conference call takes 2 hours,
I know,
great, your kid's going to be here for 2 hours as well.
Cool. Yeah.
So
or I know one of our parents comes in here and she hits her show. She's watching her show, like, I'm going to watch this at the house anyways. Great, I'll watch my show while my kid trains, and everything's great there too. And then another thing, like you said, is like obviously the value that's brought on that same side. Because I think, I don't know if we hit on that hard enough, like I think you just mentioned it there, was what we did is we offered 4 times as much training and added lifting for the same exact price that they were paying before for just 1 day and no lifting. So what did we do there? Why this has become an insane deal as well as like what we did in house? Well, I just looked at our customers and I was like, okay, what is our clients dealing with, right? Okay, well, they're coming to us 1 day a week, right? And we're training them. But then they're also, on the same note of that, have to pay for a batting cage membership, right? Which they're paying XYZ so they can go. And we have a local facility here that everybody likes to train at. And then on top of that, too, they're paying a strength coach. So they're paying all those things together. They're not grouped. They're not coupled. And all this money that, parents, and I also know, and then they're paying club ball, and then they're paying for this, and then they're paying for the info coach, all the stuff,
kids
right?
Are very expensive.
Yeah. So that when we did that and brought those things together, and then also too, from my side of things, so now what happens? Some of those people are cutting out their batting cage time. Maybe they're got to cut back, no membership. Hey, I don't have money to do that. Or they're not getting a strength coach because of that as well. And then results wise for us, then that also hurts, and then also hurts our bottom line because as well, is like if we're not getting results with athletes, well, then why would you come train with us, right? So all around, we had to take care of a lot of those issues so that we could get results with our athletes, and they could find so much value in that it all comes together, right? So the macro view there, rather than looking like micro, meaning like, well, if they come this many days, then how are we gonna do the thing? It's like, no. We're highly focused on results, and if you're highly focused on results, you're gonna have plenty of clientele. And so I think that's the other thing as well. And again, let's say you're a college coach. Let's say you're a high school coach. Let's say you're all those other things. Your biggest recruiting things, be good, right? And so you have to develop your players. You got to recruit well, right? And you got to develop your players so that you're able to do it. There's plenty of people that can't recruit well because of what school they're in the middle of nowhere in Nebraska or whatever. No shame on Nebraska. Now, I don't even know if I've ever been in Nebraska. I just that's the problem.
You hear
my
that,
point.
Cody? I know Cody's going to hear that.
I'm sorry, Code. Yeah, on that same side of that, right? Like, again, I've played in the middle of nowhere places, right? And so you got to have these selling points. And again, you got to think of it more like a business. It's like, why would somebody want to come here? What do we have over other businesses or in value that we could provide in it? And the last thing I think you'll really like this one is I heard this quote the other day, and I've been on this for a little while, is I've been just very anti how it's preached about because it made me think of this note here, is I've been very anti what is really taught in sports, typically in society, of competing. And what I don't like is competing often is mistaken for comparison. And so they're like, I'm not comparing, we're just competing, right? But a quote I heard the other day that I really loved is, a flower doesn't look at the other flower and try to grow larger. A flower doesn't look at the other flower and go, well, I got to be prettier. A flower doesn't these other things. And then people argue on the same side of that of being like, okay, well, flowers of, evolution throughout time and blah, 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 blah. No. It just blooms. It does what it has to do to survive. It's not sitting here looking. It doesn't have a perspective. It doesn't have eyes. It doesn't have ears. It just blossoms, right? And I think on the same side of that is what talk about, like, competition should be with you. You should be competing with yourself of being like, hey, what do I need to do to survive here? Because what happens is when we start looking around and comparing, we do one of two things, right? We either go, wow, I'm nowhere near that. Why do I even try? We get insecure about it, all those things. Or two, to make ourselves feel better, right? Or I guess there's 3 options. Two, to make ourselves feel better, we start to try to destroy other people's buildings or what they've put in, and I'm better than him, and blah, 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 blah. And then the last one as well is you start to gain a sense of arrogance, like, oh, why do I need to try? I'm so much better than everybody, and all these other things. Well, yeah, but you're also, too, you've been gifted different than other people have been gifted. And so you have advantages that they don't have. So on the same side of that as well, you should be trying to push to your maximum potential. It shouldn't have anything to do with what somebody else does from that other way. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't be your best. It doesn't mean that you can't look around and be observant. But when you get into the what's kind of preached by competitiveness, which is more so comparison, and then ranking yourself of how I rank in the world with that. And I think with that is like colleges, they look at other colleges and they start to shame other colleges and go, well, if you go there, you're not going to hit because it's so cold and da 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 da. And if you do this and da 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 da, all those other things, rather than looking from a place is like, where do we have as value and what can we provide on the same side of that, and how great can we grow where we're currently at, or my feet currently are, and all those things as well. And really preach from that point. And I think that's a different way of looking at competitiveness. Is you're competing with yourself of how much better I can get, how much better I can be, and comparing to myself to my yesterdays, right? And how much better I need to get from there. And then context to my context. Sorry, Taylor, I'm on a spiel right now. But context to my context, you also got to be careful. Sometimes people will look back in comparison, right? I actually just read this last night. In the Bible we'll look back in comparison and go, oh, well, that part of my life was easier. So that means, again, things were going better for me. I was making more money. I was all these other things. So I've gone backwards. I've regressed. I've done this, all these other things. Every moment in time is independent with different contexts and different scenarios. Yeah, you were making more money before, but you also didn't have 3 kids. You also weren't divorced. You also weren't X, Y, and Z. Like all these things that are happening. Also, you might have lost your job. And also, too, you might have had a job that you fell into that just happened to fall into your lap, and then that company crumbled or whatever. And that's just not the current situation. And also, too, again, like if you think of it like if we're at war or something like that and you're a soldier, right? Just because you won a war over there with some other context because, we were so dominant and all these other things. Well, guess what? You were on dirt and you were on all these things. You were in the middle of the desert, all this stuff. Now you're in mountains and it's freezing cold and there's snow and there's all these other different landscapes. And you got to deal with the problem that you currently have. Mm-hmm. And so one of the perspectives that I like to give from this same spot is you got to understand what happened 10 minutes ago, what happened 10 years ago, what does that have to do with you right now, right? If you were to wake up right now, you didn't choose the situation, but this is the situation you're in. You got to make decisions from there. How do I get out of here? You can't go, well, I've applied at 50 places and nobody's, picked up. So I'm going to, what, you're going to stop applying for jobs? Mm-hmm. Like, I have to pick it up just like if today was day one, opening day, right? And it is opening day, right? Yep. But like, if I go and compete, like it's opening day, like, so what? Like, again, who cares if 100 people didn't respond to me? Mm-hmm. Like, who cares? I have to, like, if I drew a card out of a deck, this is the situation, and I got to make moves rather than letting all the emotions and all the things come in and being, I'm not good enough. I haven't done this. You're living from your past and letting that consume you, rather than going into a place of, hey, like, it's today. Mm-hmm. I can make decisions today. I can make moves today. I can do these other things and not letting my past, like, guess what? We're going to get our teeth punched in. These things are going to happen. But sitting where you're at currently right now and make moves, right? And so when you are doing your comparison is also, you got to look at it accurately. And when you're competing with yourself, you're competing with you today. What is my best today? What does that look like today? My best yesterday looks different than my best today. Sure. Yesterday I was fresh. I didn't have 6 months of me playing. I'm on game 1 compared to game 162, right? I have to compete and give my best today. And yesterday's best might not be today's best, but I still gave my best, right? And I think that that's a different way of looking at it too, where people start to judge themselves in that same way. It's like, oh, I used to make more money. Mm-hmm. Oh, I was hitting 500. Oh, I was doing these things. Okay, mm-hmm. What does that have to do with you performing at your best today? Right. Contextually there.
No, I think it made me think about, so growing up, around wrestling and boxing and MMA a lot. My dad, the first question I would always ask our youth wrestlers, I coached youth wrestling for quite some time, and I would ask them often, like, who's in your bracket? Mm-hmm. And on the flip side of that, my dad would always say, it doesn't matter who's in the bracket. And I used to think that was ridiculous. I'm like, no, like I want to know who's in the bracket. I want to like stalk them, find their 8th grade photo, like what have they been working on? Like I want to do all the things.
Yeah.
But he used to say it doesn't matter who's in the bracket because exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
I don't actually know what they've been working on. I only know what I can find.
Yeah.
I don't actually know what's going on with them mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. I don't know the person that's going to show up to our match that day at this time.
Yeah.
But I can see who they were and what they used to be.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that's the person that I'm going to get that
Yeah.
day.
You're
so,
seeing the resume.
yes,
Yeah.
I'm seeing the resume. Exactly.
sure.
I get the highlight reel. I can
Yeah.
look at your highlight reel.
Yeah.
But what is actually going to show up that day, I don't know.
For sure.
And that's where I'm a little bit more appreciative of the doesn't matter who's in the bracket nowadays. But
Yeah.
I think it's the same, baseball seasons, you're going to you're going to play the same team,
Yeah.
but you're not always
don't
going to
always
see
show
the
up.
same players.
Well, and that's where Otani said that when he was playing. He told the team he had a talk with Team Japan before they came out, and he said, "Hey, you guys got to stop admiring these guys on the other side because you watch them on TV and all these things. Like today, we need to be better than them. Today, we have to play better. We have to score more runs than them." Today, we don't. It's okay. We understand that these guys might be the best in the world, X, Y, and Z, but today we just need to do enough to beat them. And again, they ended up, coming out and doing their thing. But I think on the same side of that, it's like that having that mentality all the time, and locking in on, hey, like this is what I'm gonna do today, and and where I'm focused and where my energy is going to go. And I'm going to come out and be my best, right? If I'm my best, right? And again, this isn't contextual, like obviously scouting reports, all these things, like they're useful, all this stuff, right? But at the same time, you can, like your dad was saying there, is you can slip into this place of like, oh, I can go easier because they're not that good, or they're so good. Oh, what is that? Blah, 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 blah. Right. Rather than on the same side of that, it's like, yeah, I don't mind watching some footage of them, move around or do whatever. But at the same time, I got to be in the same place where I'm like, it doesn't really matter. I'm going to come out, I'm going to play my best. I'm going to do my game. I'm going to do these other things. Like if I'm a Muay Thai fighter, I'm not going to all of a sudden like, oh, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to wrestle because that guy doesn't know how to wrestle. It's like, okay, well, you don't know how to wrestle. Like, again, I got to play my game, and know what I'm good at. And sometimes too, like, for example, let's say it's a brawler match. Well, the guys are going to go out there and throw fists. Like that's what they're going to do. They're going to stand toe to toe and they're going to hammer. And if there's two teams that hit bombs, that's probably what they're going to go out and do. You don't need to come out and go, oh, well, they hit bombs, so we're going to try to play small ball. Like, you guys suck at small ball.
Right.
Like, you haven't done that the whole time.
Well, and
It's
like you've talked
slug
about,
it out.
and you have that player that won. Well, they hit a home run. Now they're going to bunt, and then they're going to just put the ball in play. Like you got those guys too.
Yeah, 100%. And you got both sides of the team there, right? That it's like, again, on the team, right? Like, just because your teammates hammer homers, maybe you're the guy that moves everybody over. Like I said that all the time. Like, I ended up being a guy that hit a lot of extra base hits for the team. But for me to get in the lineup, I was the guy. I had to figure out how I could get in the lineup. And I realized on the same side of that, it's like, hey, I got to be the guy on this team to get in the lineup. I need to be able to hit a ground ball to second base. That was a big issue on my junior college team. Nobody on the team could control the barrel and hit a ball to second base. And we had situations where that's what we needed to do. We weren't a team that's going to hit a whole bunch of home runs. We had a cold climate. The fields were big. All the fields that we played on were in Northern California, like real Northern California, not Central California as I would call it, right? Like we're up there in the trees, right? Like we're in the middle of there out there next to Mount Shasta, almost Oregon, right? Like we are up there. And so I think that's the same thing. It's like, our coach, we had a different way of how we needed to play to score runs. And so that's how I got in the lineup. And then once I got in the lineup, okay, well then, yeah, I can be situational, but when I need to be, but also too, there's a time and a place that's a situation that I need to drive a ball into a gap. I need to hit a home run. Right. I need to do these other things, or again, get a ball that I'm hitting balls hard. And so you being able to do those things, is again opens up the game. And I used to do this as well, like like as a baseball player, like I used to always have that as like developing these skills. Like I would do it all the time where I'd hit a home run or I'd hit a double, and then my next at bat, the third baseman would play back, and I'd drop a drag, and I would be like, bro, you better defend. Like you have to, like, I'm playing the game. Like you have to defend my game, and I can do all that, right? And again, if you take that into like slappers in the side of softball, it's like I can do all of that, right? I'm not a single threat, I'm not a double threat, I'm a triple threat, right? And again, along with it, I can do all of these things, and also too, and I've learned how to hit, where I can hit for some power. I can do, like again, there's all of these different things that I can bring into my game, and you better be able to defend all of them. right? And if you can't defend it, right, that's my job. Is again, basketball, it's the same way. It's like, okay, great, make him dribble to his left. Okay, oh yeah, he doesn't like to stay on the outside and shoot. And then all those things, and then like that's where again, like when you're defending, like LeBron used to say the same thing. It's like guys would ask, like, how do you stop LeBron? It's like, okay, well, he'll step from the outside and he'll shoot, and then also too, he'll jam the hole, and blah blah blah. And he's so physical, and like it makes him really hard to defend. And that's what you want to do, is develop your skill set so much that it's really hard to defend you. And it becomes that. And that's those things of like learning yourself and also learning the game and learning and developing your game. Where like I'm like, hey, I always tell them, it's like, again, I want to drop a bunt down. So now the next time you play up, well, now that has opened up my 6-hole. So now when I hit a ground ball to that pull side, it opened up the defense, because they have to protect on all those things, and they can't just shift on me basically and only do one thing or another. And yeah, you got to figure those parts out and learn how to do those things. And again, maybe your game is hitting home runs. That's okay too, right? Like, you better defend me, because you know what? I'm going to strike out, but I'm also going to hit 40 home runs a year.
Yep.
Okay. Well, it's a different game, right? Like, he knows their game. Like, there's no reason that Aaron Judge needs to be up there dropping drag bunts, right? It's just not his job. It's not his job on the team, right? And also, if he did that, you'd be like, okay, I get it. Pull it out every once in a while. But if Aaron Judge started bunting 2 times a game, you'd be like, all right, what are we doing? Right? I'd rather you strike out, because you also have the opportunity to hit a jack right now, and you hit more jacks than almost anybody in the league, right? So it's those things of like keeping it in and knowing your game and knowing where you provide the most value to the organization or your team or X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
That becomes huge.
Well, and I think it all goes back to what we've talked a lot about, you and I, is getting to know yourself more, getting to know yourself
awareness.
on a deeper level, awareness, being mindful,
Superpower.
understanding what your superpowers are, understanding how you learn. I'll ask that to people I talk to on the phone all the time when we're talking about remote programming. I say, well, how do you learn best? How does your athlete learn best? Do they need a video? Do they need programming that's written form? How do you learn best? Because the more you get to understand yourself as an athlete, the more you understand your cues, the more you can understand your feels, get in touch with your body, what your body's doing. Jarrell and Cody were talking about the other day, and I could, somewhat relate. However, my body hurts all the time, but they were talking about, when their body hurts, they know after a workout and why it happened, and at what point, why that muscle is sore, and so on and so forth. And I just started thinking again, like, that heightened awareness that you build over time when you're training, when you're working out, when you're doing these specific tasks, you are training your body to understand itself more. And you talk about the CNS system a lot, and how that gets worked into a lot of how you train. And I think that's it's incredible to watch. And if you're not thinking about those things, you need to start.
Yeah, and I think your other part that you have with that too is like that understanding of like, okay, if I think as a teacher, as a teacher, coach, all those things, you got to figure out how they learn, right? But also too, as a student, you need to try to expand how you learn.
Correct.
So it goes both ways, right? Like teacher, hey, what's their dominant way that they learn? Do they need to see it? Do they need to feel this? They need to visualize this. What is that, right? What does that look like for them? Are they a reader, right? Do I need to write it down? Like, what is that, right? Do they need to see it on a board? Do they need to see a video over and over and over and over again? Do they need to actually go through it, right? What is that, right? But as a learner, like for example, when I was young, because my brain's like, right? I needed things that were really engaging. Like I hated reading. I didn't learn a lot from reading. I didn't retain very well, right? But I developed that over time. And then now that opens the door, because imagine this, if you can only learn in one way, that limits how you can learn.
For sure.
Right? Now everything that's written, think of how much information is written in the world that you'll never know because you can't learn and read, right? Like reading is a big deal and being able to retain is a big deal. Now let's say too, you could only read and visually it doesn't, anything. Or I had one guy, we were explaining to somebody who was a assistant GM for a team. And he's like, well, what does that look like on a graph? Right. And his brain works in graphs and mathematics and all those other things. Right. Right. God bless him. Right. Tay?
Yeah.
Tay's like, that's the
Not
opposite
me.
for me.
Not I.
But again, like how that is different, right? Because that's the other thing. He couldn't comprehend what I was talking about because he needed to not, I could show him a video on a phone. He'd be like, okay, but what does that look from kinematic? Like I need a graph, right? And that's how he would learn. So now if you can expand the ways that you're able to learn, which is not a right now fix, but it is a long-term process where, again, at one point, I didn't learn a lot from reading, right? So that day, it would have been better to show me visually or make visually, let me feel it, all those things, right? But over time, I develop all those skills because I think the number one way that everybody learns, right, is them doing it themselves.
For sure.
Right. Second is usually, again, first off, visually is a massive thing, right? But I can visually, for me, and I think this is true in general, this isn't true for everybody, but in general, largely, especially with how our brains with the low attention spans, is us moving, doing, all those things are typically more engaged. Then visually, because it's the next most stimulating, reading and those things typically go further down on the list in general for general population. Now, some people are massive readers and that's how they learn the majority of everything, right? But in general, I'd say, again, our attention spans are getting less and less over time. It doesn't matter if you're 12 or if you're 50, 80, 90, right? All the attention spans are getting lesser because all of us live in a world of things are quicker, faster, more engaging. So I think on that same note of that is like, as a learner, you need to become, just like we talk about, like, listener compared to on the same side of that. Well, like as a teacher, right? As a teacher, I got to explain things in ways that I know that they're going to comprehend. As a listener, I need to be a better listener, and I also need to be a better teacher, right? I need to know a bunch of different ways to explain it, right? But as a listener, I need to be able to listen in a bunch of different ways to understand what they are actually trying to communicate with me. And it works both ways. And typically, we just focus on one or the other, and generally we usually focus on like for example, like listening, right? Like everybody would focus like, hey, I need to become a better listener and da-da-da-da, right? Well, yeah, but also too, from the opposite side, right? Especially if you're a coach, like you got to be better at presenting it in a lot of different ways, right? And you got to be better at helping them learn and all those things. So it's a two-way street, right? That if you really want to get the most out, each side should be focused on what they can do in those situations. So I think that's just, big there, and just like some nuggets and some things to, for people to unpack, and just some of the cool things that we've done and we've seen just in-house just here recently. You got anything before I pray us out?
Oh, let's rock and roll. Happy opening day, everybody.
Yeah, happy opening
Enjoy
day.
the game.
They probably won't hear it till then, but it's okay. We're still wishing you a happy opening
new
day.
season.
Yeah, good for y'all. Good for y'all. All right. Let's pray it out. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for everything, God. Just the ways that you provide. Thank you for the things that I can't even thank you for because I'm not even aware of. Thank you so much for the ways that, the people that you put in our lives, the ways that you move, and all the ways that you're continuing to grab our hearts and break us free from chains so that you can take us other places. Just remind us that we're in valleys, or remind us that if we're going through a struggle season here, God, that you're with us, and that, again, you have a purpose, you have a plan, there's a reason that you have us there, and continue to give us the strength and awareness to have peace, to have energy, tenacity while we're in those valleys, so that we continue to push forward with you, God. And we ask all of these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Okay, well, until next time, Farm System out.